Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of my fall series, Essence podcast, Into the Woods, where I speak with all manner of different folkloric, traditional, and in this case, psychotherapeutically inclined witches and social and spiritual practitioners. I am very pleased to have somebody I'm quite excited to speak to today. I have Ash McKernan on. Hello, Ash.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Welcome to the show. So, for those of you who don't know who Ash is the writer of Weirdcraft, Healing Self and Nature Through the Mysteries of the Fates. And I was particularly interested in having you on as somebody who practices with weird myself. I was very excited, first of all, that you came out with this book, because when I saw it, it was around the time that I was not starting to develop, but I was in really far into my own books process, and weird shows up in my own work. And so I was really excited to see this, especially as a jumping off point and getting my hands on this. So for those of you who don't know who Ash is, so Ash McKernan, LMFT, is a licensed psychotherapist, ecotherapist, bard in training, naturalist, and weird worker. He has degrees in anthropology and counseling psychology, and loves to spend time at the crossroads where psyche, nature, magic, and healing intersect. You can visit his website at www.weirdwildweb.com. And of course, I will always put those down in the show notes. And some of you who went to Starwood last year or earlier in the year may recognize Ash because you actually went to Starwood in a couple of other big events, didn't you?
Yeah. Yeah, that was in July. I went to Starwood and then it was a week at Starwood and then right after that a week at Brushwood. And Brushwood is the location of Sirius Rising. So it was the Sirius Rising gathering. But
That's right.
very
And I
fun.
think, sorry, go on.
I was just gonna say very fun and just camping for 2 weeks and getting the opportunity to dance and be with the fire and fire in the drum and the stars and in ritual with people for 2 weeks is yeah, it's intense, but it was a wonderful experience. So I'm still processing it. And, yeah.
Absolutely. Being in such a space. It can be both exhausting and energizing at the same time. It's a weird thing, isn't it? Mm.
Definitely. Yeah, it's you know, I don't know how it works. I guess it's just that it's the energy, it's the energizing, tapping into that potential, to the magic, being so exhausted, 4 hours of sleep, 5 hours of sleep, but somehow feel great.
Yeah. I
Some may
almost
call it
I
mania.
so well, some would. I would maybe agree with them, right? But it's interesting because it takes us out of our norm, that resting kind of maybe bitch face that we're always in, right? Puts us into something different, so I'm curious. Maybe we can start off with that. What is your tipping point? When do you know that work has put you into a different space?
From resting bitch face to resting witch face,
Yes,
maybe.
exactly.
Um,
Yes, exactly.
when do I know I've hit that tipping point? That's a good question. I think when it's 2 in the afternoon and I have energy.
Ah,
Yeah. Like if if the fog clears, because I usually wake up eventually, it's oof, okay. But then it just lifts. It's just like a cloud in the sky or something, and then it's like I had 8 hours of sleep but I don't know if that's answering your question.
I think it does. I'm not sure how to translate that though, because I've experienced that myself, especially at some of the big fests up here in Ontario. That 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 amazing time of being up until 4 o'clock in the morning around a campfire, telling stories and engaging with that spiritual space. And then the next morning, right up again at like 11 o'clock, and feeling absolutely fine, even though you've had 4 or 5 days of that, staying up very, very late to engage with, or to drum, or to be in ritual, all of those things. So I get you. Yeah. It's like that adrenaline takes over, right?
Yeah, could be adrenaline, could be
Something else.
maybe it's say what.
Oh, or something else, right?
Yeah, it could be something else. Could be weird, right?
Be weird. Well,
Oh,
let's get into that. So weird. I first of all, Ash, I love this book. I really do. As somebody coming from both that psychotherapeutic and also that spiritual background and the spaces in between, I was really excited that first of all you translated this into a guiding way that I think can be very difficult because weird is so experiential. Um, but also that you included so many jumping off points that people can bring this into your life, into their lives, I should say. So let's. I don't want to ask you what made you write this book, but I do want to ask you as a starting point of weird. Tell us about weird in your life. When did you start to work with it? When did you start to become aware of it? And how has that process been for you?
Mm. Well, I started to become aware of weird when I was really young, though I didn't know that weird was the name for it. You know, it was just growing up in the woods and growing up in the country, just being really kind of embedded in nature and natural processes and the seasons and being outside a whole bunch. And that was, you know, that's a big part of it. Having an early childhood, somewhat near death experience definitely did it too, because that just it opened up a doorway that I needed to try to understand in order to heal, in order to heal from the experience. And so that healing journey took me into a lot of weird places in the sense of magic, the occult, hidden things, mysterious things, you know, unsolved mysteries, Bigfoot, Loch Ness monster, you know, all that stuff, UFOs, um, just to try to understand what happened. Um, and that, you know, that led into music, and I think weird came through music in the sense of,
Mm,
you know, it's hard to talk about this without defining weird too, because um, for for me, the way I'm kind of thinking about it is that weird is this braid. It's a braid composed of many threads, and these threads are magic, nature, soul, um, fate, destiny, and this process of becoming. And they're kind of all and healing. I do think that healing is an integral part of weird. Um, as healing is an integral part of nature, and healing is an
absolutely.
integral part of soul, and
Right.
you know, and fate and destiny. It's meant to be. It's meant to happen.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so I think music was also a part of how I came to understand the language of weird and what weird was, and then that led into psychedelics, which opened up a lot of doors, you know, into weird, and then that led into meditation and yoga and kind of getting into tantra, which then led into um, getting into more kind of, I don't know, European traditions. And then I was super interested in my own like ancestral traditions, um, and then eventually I came, yeah, and then that brought me into social work, and then that brought me into psychotherapy, or as I call it, psychotherapy, and then that brought me to the word weird. You know, I was so it was kind of all those things. Eventually I saw that word, and it wasn't the first time I saw it, but for some reason when I saw it that time, it just it illuminated this web that connected all of these experiences throughout my life, and all the experiences that I had, you know, working with people in social work and working with magic, working with music, and um, exploring the unknown, and just kind of like my life purpose, you know,
Right.
life purpose and meaning, and you know, all that. It just it all synced up, and then it was almost like a puzzle, you know, it just everything clicked, and then from that clicking, it was like a doorway open, and all this energy flowed out, and that's kind of where the book came from. Um, the book the book kind of became this well, it just spilled out. I don't know. All the connections had been made, and I just had to get it on paper, um, because I had been wanting to write for a really long time, but I didn't have anything to put it all together. It was like,
Yes.
yeah, I had all these kind of experiences, and I was like, oh, like, so weird was the thing that brought it all together. And
Love that.
in a very weird way, it was weird manifest in all the ways. And it was, and it's still going. Yeah, it's
It's
like, but
constantly unfolding, right?
yeah,
Yeah, it's constantly unfolding. Yeah. I love that. As you were saying that, I was reflecting on kind of that piece for me. It's funny how so many of our colleagues, particularly those who are now or have been looking at their ancestral work and their ancestral relationships and their ancestral spiritualities, have had that foray into India. It's like going into India as a mother to then come and find our own paths to our fatherlands, right? Again, I know that word is very loaded, but it's interesting how all those connection points for you led then to this expansion. I'm curious because I think a lot of people have this sense that weird, in particular, as that word, as that very particular cultural frame of reference, is like destiny in the Greco-Roman, and it's very different, isn't it? Can you elaborate on that? Oh well, I ask you, do you think it's different? Like, what's your opinion on that?
I don't know. I I'm not. I can't say I know the difference. Um,
Is that okay? I see.
yeah,
It's so well. Destiny. Then tell me about destiny. How does destiny come into this unveiling for you? What's that been like for you?
yeah. Well, I yeah, I love, for one, I just love the word fate, and fate and destiny. They're just charged.
Mm,
They have a push and a pull to them, and I think that is weird in action, through word, through what they evoke, and they're mysteries, right? And they draw one into them. I was certainly drawn into them, and I just always loved those words. And but the way, I guess, the way I see the difference between the two, um, is that fate is kind of like this thing that has happened or
mm,
is set in stone, um, not 100%, but is more or less set in stone. And destiny is more this thing that is kind of coming into being. So to bring it back to therapy, um, that which remains unconscious, that which we remain that which yeah we remain unconscious of, words, I'm learning to put them together still, is kind of like fate. These things that are happening that we're unconscious, and it just happens, and we're like, oh, and then as we become conscious, that becomes destiny. Like when we become
right.
conscious of how the gears fit together, how cause and effect works, and the web, basically, how then we can move some of these threads. One thing I say in the book is
Mm,
you have to see the strings of fate before you can pull the strings of fate. And I do think that fate and destiny it's the same. They're interwoven. They're the same thing, but there's kind of like a different feel. And I think in one way, it comes down to awareness. That
mm.
with fate, it's not that there's always a lack of awareness. It's just that it's already been set in motion, and it's like you were born with your DNA, I was born with mine, and that's what it is. And the Norse have a word for that called urlog. And but yeah, I just like to use the word fate because more people know that word. Um, yeah, I don't know if that's different than
Oh, it
Greek.
totally does. Oh
Um,
no, it totally is. That's for me. That's how I understand it too. Is that
yeah,
like that kind of Greco-Roman sort of idea, especially the ancient Greek concept of fate, is that it is set in stone. The fates have decreed. There's no more. There's nothing more powerful than the fates. Even the gods bow down to it, right? But what is fated to happen will happen. Oftentimes, individuals have that. Not even agency. They put that fate into motion themselves through being in the way. I talk about that in my own book. That oftentimes my working with weird is learning to understand the physical feeling of, oh, I'm in the way right now and stepping out of the way of destiny, right? Versus that idea of destiny, which is that, and that's where the weird working comes in, that ability to see the web and the ability to then know when to pluck the string here, which will affect over here, and so on and so on. We don't have control, we're working with it, right? As opposed to fate, where people try to control, and then it just ends up hearkening and creating that what was already pre-fated, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way to put it. I like thinking of
Yeah,
fate as natural law too. Like
right.
all these natural laws, that's kind of like fate, like gravity or something, or death, Death is it's inevitable. It's going to happen. But there's more. Death is also a mystery, so death is also kind of life, and death is but a doorway and it's just a transformation.
Mm,
And, and so transformation is also fate. The fact that change, the natural law of change and the natural law of healing, I think it's fate, but it's also destiny. And and part of it can be crafted and part of it can't. And it's kind of
mm,
up to us to see which ones can and can't be. One thing that I get to a little bit in the book is that I think that the fates like we are the fates.
we
Like
are the
we
fates.
each
Mm,
one of us is our own fates. And the more we realize that, the more we can craft our world in a healing way, so that we all can heal together and ultimately come to the ultimate healing, which is the return to source, which is fated and destined to be. Like I don't know when, that's kind
mhm.
of the mystery. Like I don't know, it's different for everybody and for every being in a sense, but um I yeah, that's what I love about weird and weirdcraft, that there's kind of a simultaneous, it's yin yang or something. There's a surrender to it, and there's a beautiful flow, and it's magical and it's healing and it's inspiring, and and it also says, hey, come onto the dance floor. We're
Right.
gonna
It
dance
invites others.
together.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's scary, right? To come into being more and more and to see the truth more and more. It's not easy. It's it's terrifying. I mean,
Terrifying. It is terrifying. It is
yeah,
terrifying. You're right.
on some level, right? To the egoic self, or to through the lens that we've built our world through. It's doesn't want to see that everything needs to dissolve in order to return, in order to heal, kind of. So anyway, it gets really weird, gets really out there, right? It gets
It
really,
does. It's timey wimey. It's liminal. It's all those. It eliminates that sense, that false sense of control, and that's what our egos don't like, right? Yeah.
and that's what our ancestors didn't like too, because they saw weird, and they were terrified of weird back then. Weird was not something to be messed with, and they were scared of it. But I also think we understand the nature of reality in some ways more than they did. So
Mm.
we, in some ways less. But yeah,
Do you think that it's a sensitivity thing? Because I'm thinking, as you were saying that, I was thinking about how, like in the sagas, for example, the Icelandic sagas, you often find that there's those premonitions, the ripples of future events coming in as, oh, okay, the understanding of omens, the sensitivity. That's what I feel like we're now in, at least in our communities, we're trying to get back to that sensitivity. But I'm curious, would you agree or do you disagree with that? What do you think?
yeah, yes. I don't. Sensitivity is a good way to put it. Um, another way to put it is getting back to animism,
Yeah.
getting back to soul, this mystery that is everything and that connects everything. And these psychedelic experiences, soul revealing experiences, like synchronicity, like the omens or whatever, the natural waves and spirals of the natural of nature, really, of everything, of not just the natural world but human nature and everything in existence. That yeah, the more sensitive, the more we can attune to these, to the ways of weird, um the more we'll just be in a better place.
I agree.
But yeah, the sensitivity is so important, and we've built a world that makes us scared or want to hide, and just our we're super empathic beings. I think that's
Yeah.
part of being human, is the empathy, that we feel each other's pain, we feel each other's love, and we're trying to make sense of everything, and we're doing our
Mhm.
best. But oftentimes we're passing around fear and anxiety and paranoia and anger, and there's so many unprocessed wounds that we're
Absolutely.
just acting out on each other. And so
It's
yes.
reactionary, isn't it? It's reactionary as opposed to responsive. Yeah.
Mhm. Yep.
Yeah.
Right. It's like triggers
Mm.
happen when the wound hasn't been processed. Right. So, and well,
Understood.
that's not to say that the trigger won't still happen, but you'll react more wisely, hopefully,
Mm.
if as you process, or as I process my stuff. But
The royal we, all of us we. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I hear you. Yeah.
So,
That's
yes.
it. Sorry, continue. I keep talking over you. I apologize.
Oh no, maybe there's a lag here. I
I think
mean,
so.
the beauty of Zoom, but I am curious what you were going to say, because I was just going to say something about psyche therapy, but yeah.
Mm. Well, I'm curious about that piece around because we work in very similar fields. I feel like we work in very similar modalities too. What I've noticed is that the trigger pieces, and here I'll just kind of show that here very quickly. Like I tend to work with spirals a lot in my own life and see time as a spiral constantly coming back again to, although we're not in the same place in the spiral, we're in the same position on the spiral. And I feel like with triggers, a lot of times, especially with trauma, it's the same thing. People are triggered not by what's happening in front of them, they're triggered by actually what happened before. And they're just reminded of that. That's the trigger, right? And so I was curious then with this idea of psyche therapy, kind of what was your journey from psychotherapy to psyche therapy? And can you tell us about that? A
Yeah.
huge journey.
Yeah, I'm just taking a breath, like
Yeah.
thinking about this process, following that thread, but
Mm.
I think you know I could take that back, but I'll just take it to grad school, in the sense of I went to a school that it was a transpersonal counseling program. So for those who never heard that term, transpersonal just means beyond the personal, which is another way to say it includes the ego, but it also is it includes the higher self and the spiritual realms and all that stuff. So psyche therapy to me is a transpersonal psychotherapy, but I like to use the term psyche because I love Psyche. I love the goddess, and 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 doing the work of psychotherapy feels like magic. It feels like ritual. It feels like getting this opportunity to be in relationship with the divine, and it's a holistic therapy. Um, so as I kind of break it apart in the book, it's mind, body, relationship, environment, soul, spirit. So it's therapy for all of these parts, and and all therapy is this kind of therapy, because everything is connected, right? So if we work on our mind, it's going to influence body. It's going to influence how we relate to people. It's going to influence our how we relate to our environment and our spirit and soul and so forth. So yeah, I love I love it for different reasons. One, because it's like it's so cool to be working with psyche and to be working with weird and to be working with the trickster, because I think that
Mm.
them three and all that they are and so many others show up in psychotherapy. You know,
Mhm.
it's psychotherapy and psychotherapy in general. It's very polytheistic, and you know, the human psyche is multifaceted, and we have all these parts, and we are in relationship with all these parts, and within us and without us, and um, yeah. So I guess my path was like through the school. It was called California Institute of Integral Studies,
Oh
and
yes, okay. I know that. I know that study program. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, they're doing cool stuff. They're doing a lot with psychedelic therapies right now, but also ecotherapy and archetypal therapy, imaginal therapy, and also the traditional therapies. That's the thing I like, is that they bridge the worlds of the traditional Western kind of European models of psychotherapy and with the Eastern
Mhm.
meditation, yoga, you know, with Southern and Northern. Even though they just say East and West, they just kind of bring it together in that way. But it is all quadrants in a way that they try to bring in, and I do think it's you know, it's a paradigm. It shows a paradigm shift in the world of therapy and in the world of mental health, that it's just saying, hey, we're more than just our thoughts, and not everything can be solved by just looking at thoughts. Like, we have to look at how thoughts are connected to the body, and how the body's connected to other bodies, and how our
Absolutely.
bodies are connected to the world, and how our world is connected to our soul and spirit, and you know, all that. So it's really fun
Yeah.
to be in a process of psychotherapy or psychotherapy, if you look at
Mm.
it in that lens. It's maybe that's just me talking. I don't know.
No,
I
I agree with you. I totally agree with you. I was getting excited there because a lot of the people is a very similar training program to the one I took here in Ontario, and a lot of the people who were in my cohort are now then going into psychedelic therapies up here. We've just had the ketamine trials up here, and from my own personal experience, I mean, it's one of those things where I think the greatest healing I've experienced is the use of medicines like that, with traditional therapy, but also that background in those parts therapies and the systems therapies and the therapies that brought me outside of myself. I think the greatest healing for me was realizing how much the lenses that I've put up as defenses were the ones that were causing the greatest issues in my life. I was the one who was causing the greatest disturbances in my life. And when I was able to step out of the way, right?
yeah,
But it was those
yeah,
medicines that were helping me in understanding that.
yeah. Those medicines are tricksters in and of themselves,
Yeah.
and they show us our own trickster, our own inner trickster, and they are weird, and they show us
Mm-hmm.
our own weird,
Yeah.
and all those layers, all those barriers, all those blocks, you know, all the veils that that exist between us and source.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of them. And you know, I did say that it's a lot of fun to go through it and to go through them. It's not always fun, but it's always worth it.
I agree. I
Yeah,
agree. I
because
agree.
there's powerful soul magic that's found through that process of healing. And it's another reason I like psychotherapy, and that I call it weird craft, because it to me, therapy is magic. It's
Mm.
it's just it's a very, actually a very, very powerful form of magic. Um, it's change that sends ripples through all the worlds. And
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's, I think, I hope that there's a shift in the pagan kind of community and in general that is being more open and stuff to therapy. Um, and I think it is happening. You know, it's been happening a while. I mean, there's been pagan therapists for decades, you know.
Decades and decades. Absolutely. Well, Adler. I mean, Margot Adler, very famously was one of us, right?
Yeah.
Can I ask you then, because I love books like this. I love them. And I bring in a lot of that internal and shadow work and that internal healing work in my own work. What I've noticed with the pagan community, particularly, and I want to hear your thoughts on this, there can be a lot of trauma that brings people to these communities. A lot of people sitting in religious trauma. I had a couple of guests on that spoke in particularly in their own works. Vinnie Higginbotham was speaking about how witchcraft can be a therapy for, in his case, sexual abuse and addictions and other pieces. A lot of people come hurting to these traditions because they offer the glimpse of empowerment again. But then what happens, at least this is my own opinion, is what can often happen is then the religious aspect, the spiritual aspect, the ritual aspect becomes over psychoanalyzed, right? It becomes it becomes all intellectualized, and the lived experience piece and the actually experiencing reality as it is, as opposed to how we're perceiving it, gets in the way. You know, we often see like all the gods as archetypes. And what do archetypes do? Well, they're just, you know, things to think about. At least that's how in popular cultures they're seen as. So I'm curious for you, what, how can I ask this without sounding like an idiot? Um, what, what do you think needs to change in paganism to allow therapy to not be just a mental construct and a mental exercise? And also what in paganism and these and animism can be brought into therapy work? Does that make any sense? I hope that makes sense.
It, I think so. It
Words.
you're wondering what needs to happen in kind of the pagan or larger pagan community that makes people more open to therapy.
Mm-hmm. But also not just then that compartmentalizing, that westernizing of paganism as being just archetypes, just something intellectual that then the real connection is lost in.
Yeah. Um, I think I think it really depends on what the individual brings into the process because I'm thinking of, you know, there's so many different types of therapists and some of them are pagans, most of them are not. Some of them are atheists, some of them are, you know, existentialists, etc. You know, there's all different types. And and not every therapist is going to be the right match or, you know, the right person, but even
Mm-hmm.
so, you can make the most of the time with that therapist while you're there. And so I think it depends on what the individual brings. Like what is if I'm going into therapy, you know, what is my intention of going into therapy? And me being a pagan, how can I bring my paganism into this process of healing? And how can I even invite my therapist into this world? Because
Right.
the therapist may not know anything about it, and if hopefully they would not demonize or pathologize the experience. I
Mm,
mean, and I think that's one reason pagans are wary of therapy is because of that's been happening for a long time.
absolutely.
Um, you know, people who talk to gods and goddesses, oh, you're crazy, you know, schizophrenia or whatever, you know. So finding a transpersonal therapist is a good, you know, just do a search for transpersonal therapist or archetypal therapist or imaginal or gestalt or Jungian or I don't know, what are some that come to your
All
mind?
like, all those I think cover it. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But with that then. and I guess this is more of a line I was looking at getting your opinion on, because all of those are Western paradigms. At the core of many of them, I mean, Jung to some degree, I love Jung, but when you read his work, there can often be all these deities, all these spirits, all these are just manifestations of my mind, right? And I feel like in Western psychotherapy in general, doesn't matter even transpersonal, it can be that sense of, well, these are just manifestations. It's almost like a very kind of Buddhist approach to seeing reality, as opposed to necessarily an animistic, where the rocks, the trees, the world is filled with sentient spirits. And so I suppose that's my question, is how do we bring therapy into paganism without it impacting the lived experience of experiencing reality as it is, as opposed to, well, the spirits are all just mental manifestations, or they're symbolic and that's it. What's your opinion on that?
Um, I don't
And
know
don't
if
be
I.
shy if you're like more of a symbolic sort of person, like, challenge
Oh,
me on that. But
no, no. Well, I mean, let me. Yeah, I think I am both. I'm the way I come from is like a both and kind of thing. And when I think about archetypes, or when I talk about, I see them as divine energies and processes and beings. Like for me,
right.
archetype is not just a mental construct.
Mm.
And I think I see it in that way because I've had personal experiences with the archetype that have um, changed my direction and have healed me, and or have helped me heal or helped me realize things. And so um, my from my point of view, it is coming from an integrative model that does integrate the Eastern kind of Buddhist, Taoist, Hindu, tantric with the Western psychotherapy models, but also the Western magical models, and also the Southern and Northern shamanic models. So it's
Mm.
kind of it's got all these together. So I think I don't think in a way it doesn't matter.
Mm.
Uh, and again, it's like what the person brings to it. Like if your gods are real, then they're real.
Right.
If they are archetypes, then they're archetypes, or if they're symbols that just are helpful at understanding the mind, then that's what they are. And um, I think it's up to the pagan to keep paganism alive,
Mm.
you know, within themselves and within their world. And in a way, to some we may have to fight for I mean, we do have to fight for animism to some
Mm.
extent. It's the world is not gonna, you know, the world's going to deem it crazy, weird,
Yeah.
right? The world's going to
Yeah.
deem it weird. And so weird crafts, with a Y, weird is kind of a reclaiming of animism. It's like, no, animism is real, and it's something that can be experienced. And I think
Mm.
that's kind of the answer. One of the answers to your question is that it's all about personal, direct experience of the divine, of the archetype, of the soul, of whatever it is that we're talking about. It's like that personal experience is 100% necessary. I think community, like having like-minded people around you, to process this stuff, to explore. Um, I'm looking forward to doing a group where kind of like a weird crafts kind of group, where either one we go through the book together, that may
Mm.
be one, or where we process the intersections of how the gods are showing up in our lives, and how
Right.
the gods are helping us heal. And
Mhm. That
so
would be an amazing group. I mean, the one thing with this book is that a lot of the exercises that you give in here you really invite people to take that experiential piece. I think that's, and I feel chastised here, and I appreciate that from you. That
Yeah.
feeling of that understanding of my own lenses, right? I certainly have my own experiences and my own relationships and how I conceptualize. My dog also has those, and she's very vocal about that right now. But that feeling of that kind of Western, maybe that Western capitalist model of making the animate inanimate, even in our own selves, that idea that we don't necessarily have to care as much about the gods as perhaps beings. They're just things, and as soon as in this capitalist Western model that we live in, something's a thing, it's either usable, or it can be easily forgettable, or it doesn't have impact because suddenly it's inanimate and it's a thing. And to me, that's, I guess, one of my biggest criticisms of this, the connection between kind of psychology and therapy and then paganism, because you get people on both perspectives, and in my opinion, missing the point. Then you get those people in between who find themselves in that liminal space, and they blend and they merge and they experience, and they have that cognitive dissonance sometimes of, I'm experiencing something right now, but it doesn't make literal sense. So I'm going to move into that subconscious space. So I don't know, just
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, no, that's more, I'm more clear on what you're saying from that too.
mm-hmm.
I just thought about kind of the commodification of the gods, and commodification of psychedelics, which is going to be
Yes.
happening, which is already happening, and
Yeah.
the commodification of the old ways, like these legitimate, powerful healing technologies that have been passed down from generation to generation are becoming identities. It's like, oh,
Yes.
I am a shaman. I am a witch. I mean, even these, I'm a witch, I'm a pagan, I'm a heathen, can become commodified. The identity culture is similar to the commodification capitalist culture. It's the same kind of
It's
thing.
the same, exactly. Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I think that's why weirdcraft is, or psychotherapy, or healing in general, is not easy, because it forces us to take a direct experiential approach towards the nature of everything, of
Yes.
including ourself and how we see ourself. And we see, oh, I've been telling a lie to myself. Like, what is this identity of me being a witch? Like, is it serving me, or how is it blocking me from source? And how is it helping me to achieve source? Because being a witch is an amazing thing. It's
Mm-hmm.
we need witches in the world. We need, but at what point does it become kind of an ego
Yes.
game? And that's, a lot of that happens unconsciously. A lot of people
Yeah.
don't see that, and that's the trickster right there. But
Mm-hmm.
um, the trickster will wake us up,
Yeah.
will show us like, oh damn, that was my ego. That's hubris, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
Very much so. Very much so. And it's painful and it's embarrassing and it doesn't feel great until afterwards when you're able to laugh about it, right? Or hopefully be able to get that to that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can
I
I
think
ask
that
you then? Sorry, go on. Sorry.
after you.
Well, I was gonna ask you about that. What, if you don't mind, a more intimate question. What was the what was your favorite experience with the trickster in your life, and what happened? Favorite.
I love that question. Because I don't know, the trickster, been trickster and I have been um friends for a while, starting with falling out of that window, when I
Mm,
was so, but I can't say that was my favorite.
yeah.
um I think my favorite was something that happened more recently. This isn't my favorite. I can't pick a favorite, to be honest.
Okay.
But this one is just kind of coming to the foreground. Um, Like coming to weird is one of my favorite things. When I found that word, that was awesome. But this one in particular was the first time I arrived at Wisteria Campground, which is where they host Starwood. That festival was it was actually last year, Starwood, the last night of the bonfire, and I realized that this fire, was was a being, and that
Mm,
this being has been calling me my whole life. And like a moth to light, I've been like on my way to this fire, and I could see everything um leading up to this moment.
mm,
And and I, the fire transformed into a very clear being that I felt and was in the presence of, and had the opportunity to commune with, and to give offerings to. And I could feel the sacred circle between us, the reciprocity, that as I was giving, it was giving. And it was just in real time, um, unfolding in the moment. And it was infinite. And which reminds me of probably the most powerful moment of Trickster that I've had, was after after an LSD trip, where I witnessed infinity. And
oh wow.
infinity is where I became infinite for a very short period of time. But that was the most Trickster thing that I've ever experienced, and the most amazing, and the most
Mm,
terrifying, and just like all everything. So
yeah.
um
Wow.
I could go on. I love the Trickster, and I've sought the Trickster my whole life, and I've broken many bones in the process, and
I
have
can
had many
imagine.
trips to the hospital in the process, and almost have gone insane, and still may go insane in the process. But you know, we'll
That's
see
that
what
thing
happens.
though. It's that is like sliding on that razor's edge, right? I mean, are you gonna become insane? You're not. Are you gonna go and suddenly be in the woods with pigs and compose poetry, right? Or not, right? Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? How I mean, I was thinking of that question myself while also listening to you. Don't take that the wrong way. But I was thinking of one of my favorite now. It wasn't a favorite when it was happening, but I was having a very particular, uh, particularly powerful integration trip, and it was just after I came back from a retreat I went on almost 18 months ago now. It's almost coming up to 2 years ago now, and I took way too many grams of mushrooms, and I was by myself, which is not advisable, but I had my trip sitter on the phone with me at the time, and I'm just like sitting there, and I took way too much, and I remember sitting there about an hour into it, and I was just bored. And all of my subpersonalities were coming up to try and entertain me. And I was just bored. And I texted him and I was like, I'm bored. I'm just bored and bored. And my comedian subpersonality came up to try and entertain me. And all of these things. And I remember he was like, well, I'm getting really tired, so go have something to drink, make sure you're drinking, and call me in a couple of hours. I need to lie down. um, it was not a great situation of how we set that up, but I'd just been on the retreat with him, so we were integrating a lot of the stuff that had come up from that. And I remember at one point I decided to take more. So I'm taking more. And it's so bad. But I had never experienced this up until this point. But I had taken way too much. And I remember suddenly the world just getting really dark. Everything was dissolving. And I had this little blanket, and I pulled the blanket up over my head. And I'm looking at the light through the blanket. And then suddenly, nothing. nothing. It was like it was all like everything just stopped, and I was just at the bottom of this cave, and suddenly all of the things that I hadn't been wanting to look at on this retreat came up, overwhelmed me, and then there was nothing. And I'm pretty sure that was ego death at that time. And at that moment, it clicked for me that I was one who all of these years had been in my own way. I could see how that piece about control had been such a big part of my life. And it was false control, my relationship with control. No wonder I work with deities that are all deities of change: Hermes, Dionysus, Oshun, all of these deities, Shiva, right? And suddenly it clicked. And suddenly it was like I could almost hear it's like boom, 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 boom. My heart started beating again, and the world came back in focus. And I was like floating around for the next few days, you know, and and I mean, it was painful to go through. I know you know what this feels like. And I think many of the people listening to this will have had perhaps similar experiences. But it was that suddenly click. And then there was nothing I can't even think of what it was like to be before that moment. It's so amazing. But I mean, it was also painful to go through as well.
Sounds
Yeah.
like you took the perfect amount.
I'm not even sure how much, because it was just like do 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 do, you know. I remember
It was
sitting there talking to it for a second. I was like, "You're such a good friend of mine," and that was one of my person. It was earlier in the trip than later on, you know.
oh, I love it. I mean, I'm laughing because yeah, I've been there. It sucks, but also it was worth it.
Very much so.
And what a
Yeah.
relief, what a relief. You got through a lot of layers and you saw deep truths, and that was healing. I mean, that experience sounds so healing.
Yeah.
And just you sharing it too is healing. To hear it,
Very
like as
much
I
so.
hear it, it's
Mm,
again, we're all empathic, like everything's contagious. So like this, you sharing this, it's like, oh, it's helping me remember the medicine of my journeys, it's coming
right.
through. That's
Really
a
is
deep
that well, that symbol of the web is really, that's why it's such a powerful thing, because we see them. I see this a lot with ancestral work. When I teach about ancestral work, when we take ourselves as being the center of this vast web, and that's who we are, our focus is on us. When we focus on the web, suddenly the idea of identity expands, all of our relationships expand, you know. I think you
Mhm.
know that. You know that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of what we were talking about earlier with these kind of layers and veils, that the ways we get in our own way. That's right. It's
Mm,
like all those parts of us that stand in between us and the realization that we are
completely.
all one, or that we are all is one.
Exactly.
And that, again, that can be disorienting to somebody who's really holding on to a lot of those layers, and feel like psychosis. It can turn into psychosis.
Very
um,
easily. Yeah.
so it's like these are very powerful magical medicines um, that work. They
They do.
work. They So yeah, it's good to have guides, good to have sitters, good to have elders and therapists. And
Yes.
oh, another thing I was going to say about that edge, that because
Hmm.
it is walking an edge. um it's, I like to call it the growing edge, but self-care, like
Yes.
that is what has helped me get through it all, is self-care and connecting with that love, because that's what's at the root of self-care. And self-care is other care, because we're all connected. So it's just love. There's love. Love is everything. It's the breath. Our breath will carry us through our entire life.
Mm,
It'll and beyond. As breath is a
agree.
trickster too. And
Hmm.
breath is going to go inside out and take us somewhere else. When from this world. Um,
It is. It's true. It's amazing how that last breath, it feels so much bigger than all the breaths before it, right? Yeah.
it's the it is. It's the one and only breath. That has also been called soul or spirit, or um, Om, or the one, and
Yeah,
where
very
it
much
goes from
so.
there. Mm,
That's the
weird.
question, right? That's the mystery. It is weird. It is weird. We're coming up to time. We're almost close, but I have a last question for you, then. Um, what is, if somebody were to pick this up or look into your work, but particularly to pick this up, and they're coming from more of a pagan spirituality point of view than necessarily a therapy point of view, what would you say is your favorite exercise in this for people to begin to work with this concept of weird? You give a lot of exercise in this. What is your favorite?
I think my favorite is the that's I don't know, it's hard to say.
Mm,
Um, I'll answer it quickly though. So my favorite is the simplest, and that's just the awareness continuum. That is not even it's a Gestalt technique. Um, but now I'm thinking, I don't know if the pagans will be super into that. I think they will, but
mm,
that's the one where like you're just aware of the present moment and what is happening. And there's three zones: inner, middle, and outer. And it's very simple.
mhm,
But I think the effects of that practice aren't you will notice pretty direct effects, but they are exponential. Like that is an
mm,
exponential exercise that just woof, it goes speeds it feeds upon itself and builds up.
mm.
I think pagans will appreciate that because I do think that pagans are experimental folk and they like
I
to learn.
agree.
They're thirsty for knowledge and gnosis and ecstasy and communion and whatnot. That being said, I think my favorite exercises from the pagan point of view and is are the ones at the end, the three ones. There's three meditations, one with the well of weird, one with the world tree with Yggdrasil, and then one with the Norns or the Fates. And those the three different exercises that end those chapters. And those are my favorite because I love guided imagery, meditation rituals involving the tree. Like
Mm,
that's my the tree is kind of, if the closest image to source that I have found, as far as a teach and the closest teacher.
mm.
So
I
I have
agree.
considered myself a druid at heart, since I grew up in the woods and just I fucking love trees,
Yeah, yeah,
and they
yeah, yeah.
learned from a lot of what I learned. Actually, I didn't say this, but the book, as I was writing the book, it felt like the forest talking. It was like
Mm,
the forest was like, "Hey, um, I asked the forest, okay, what should I write down?" And the forest is like, "This is what we want the people to know."
mhm,
And so it's written in kind of a weird way that's like
mm.
it's not quite scientific, it's not quite academic, but it is a little kind of in that, I don't know, almost like a left brain kind of approach. But yeah, it's a merging of
Yeah,
left
it's
and right brain.
integrative. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So anyway, the tree, I just bless trees. Thank you.
I love trees. I really do. And I start that with the symbol of my own book is the tree of life and death, the tree of the fruits of the descendants and the skulls of the ancestors, and all being in the same canopy. And it's such a visceral thing. I mean, I'm also Druid at heart too, and that idea of the web being kind of the what do you call it, the mycelial network, the root network holding the whole world together. I love that. It's you know yeah.
I'm really
Ash,
excited to
this
read the book.
I please do ask our
Yeah.
publicist, our shared publicist, for a copy. Please do, because I'd love to. I would love to hear what you have to say on it. On for your book, I am planning by now it'll have been out. A review of the inners and outers of this. I absolutely adored it. I thought that it was something that we definitely needed more of. I feel like so much of the written material on weird out there is more from that kind of Norse pagan religious perspective. I know that there are a load of occultists who use it and have talked about it from a practice point of view, but to bring in that healing piece, I thought was just fantastic. So thank you for not only writing it, but thank you for coming on today.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for your kind words. And thanks for this great conversation. It was super, super soulful
I
and
really
healing.
enjoyed it. It was really healing and soulful, and I appreciate that. Thank you. For those who are interested in learning more about Ash and what he has to offer, all of the links are down below. You can also find the review on my YouTube page here. And in the meantime, thank you for joining us today. And Ash, you have a good rest of the day. Everybody else, have a good rest of the day or night, and we will see you next time.
Bye-bye. Thanks.